and welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and not with me today is my usual co-host, Derek Cohen. That's because this is a special edition of The Right Idea. This is one of the ones we call an in-depth show, where we kind of take a breather from the current events and all the headlines that are going on, and just take a deep breath and talk about one particular issue in depth. And one of the most important issues that we can't spend too much time on, or enough time on, is education. Right now, Texas is in the midst of approving a new education curriculum. The curriculum has been developed, the curriculum has been drafted, it has been published, and we are just ended the review period for the new curriculum, where parents and teachers and the public can all go look at the new curriculum, and the entire state of Texas can initiate their feedback on it. That period has just ended, and starting next week, the State Board of Education will be having a meeting where they essentially review the reviews. And so we're right towards the end of this. There's a lot of issues and a lot of concerns that people had about the curriculum, but there's a lot of really, really good stuff in the curriculum. And so we're spending some time at TPPF to talk about this. And here to help us with that is our friend Dr. Marvin McNeese. Dr. McNeese was on the Open Education Resources Advisory Board, which was essentially the last stop for the curriculum for some really well-respected, high-level individuals like Dr. McNeese to review everything that had been drafted and to then put their stamp of approval on it before it went over to the State Board of Education. Our friend Dr. McNeese is a lecturer of business and public policy at Rice Business. He is also the professor of government and chair for the General Education Department at the College of Biblical Studies in Houston. He earned his PhD in political science from Rice University, and I also know that he has a master's from my alma mater, the University of Texas at Austin. So hook 'em, Dr. McNeese.
Welcome horns.
We're here talking about this. So the big issue I want to talk about today is the state of Texas last year passed a very important law, and we've had others here on our program to talk about how important HB 1605 is. It's a new law that did, among other things, required the Texas Education Agency to come up and to draft a new curriculum it starts with K through 5 reading and mathematics, and there's a whole process behind creating this new curriculum, and you know, there was a lot of folks that were involved in this, and we want to talk to a few of those. We've talked to Tom Lindsay already, who is on the OER Advisory Board, and another member of that board is Dr. McNeese as well. So we're really excited to have you here with us today to talk about this really important issue.
Yes, it's my pleasure.
The State Board of Education next week is going to, well, I should start, the review process has been going on for the new curriculum for about 4 months, and the state, that review period is now closed. The State Board of Education is going to review the reviews of all of that and take into consideration anything that maybe need to be changed or edited or fixed before they vote on approving the new curriculum next November. And one of the issues, and this is really the reason why we've asked Dr. McNeese to come and talk to us today, because I want to get his thoughts on just the overall process and the curriculum in general. But one of the things that he is uniquely able to talk with us about is this issue of including biblical references in public school curriculum. And so a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some are concerned that maybe this would cross over into proselytizing or teaching, or preaching, not teaching, those kinds of things. But Dr. McNeese, I mean, he's one of the people who probably wakes up every day thinking about this kind of issue. And I want to talk to him a little bit about, you know, how he does that and his approach. But first, Dr. McNeese, just to get you, you know, to your overall thoughts on this, tell us about your experience helping to oversee the development of the curriculum. What were you hoping to see reformed, and really what are the highlights of the new curriculum for you?
To me, the standardization, it may be a better term. I don't know if that's the best term, but it's the fact that the curriculum is laid out complete. It's integral from the beginning to the end. You know, the social science integrated with the math, with the history, with the natural science, all well packaged together. Love the inclusive nature thereof. in terms of culture, lifestyle in the sense of like ordinary American lifestyle, not any other connotation, but just very, very well-rounded, especially for the formation. We've only reviewed K through 5 up to this point, but for the formation of our younger students, I think it's just an excellent product in terms of that that aspect.
One of the big benefits that's been discussed before is how it is, and this is a new word for me, is cross-curricular. And that when you learn about historical or about important events in history, this new curriculum takes a much more complete approach, as you might call it, where it doesn't just tell you about the events of the day, but tells you about the literature and the lifestyle and the science and all of that. How important was that? I mean, that seems like a real departure from kind of what I certainly learned growing up, which was, you did world history one year, you did Texas history another year, you did, and so on. How important was that aspect of it, and how much time did y'all spend making sure that, that was going to happen in this new curriculum?
Yeah, our task was more narrow than that, but I appreciated how integrated it was, because it's about formation of the student as a person, not just about reading, writing, arithmetic. And I think this curriculum does a very good job of that.
And y'all weren't the ones. You were the board that was, kind of the end point for reviewing to make sure that it was suitable, that it was appropriate, that it was complete, and that it adhered to the way that the legislature had put it out in HB 1605. But tell us your approach to including certain historical material that would potentially include religious references, like the Golden Rule, or telling the story of Daniel in the lion's den, and those kinds of things that we all remember from growing up, but they are biblical in nature. What is your just sort of general approach for how you would go about making sure there's a right balance between including those materials and not going too far?
Exactly. I think the curriculum did a good job of including materials that are relevant to the lives of Texas students, the everyday lives of Texas students. And that's important, because what the curriculum is trying to accomplish is that students understand the world around them, the world in which they live, and the biblical and non-biblical references were helping to explain the motivations that inspired the things that happen, the things that shape the world in which students live. And what were there specific materials of a religious nature that you thought were important to that were included? Not that you specifically requested them to be included, but I mean things like the Golden Rule, or there's been there's a few pages in there discussing the life of Jesus Christ and his impact on the Roman Empire. Like, are there certain things of a biblical nature that you think are absolutely critical for kids to learn? Yeah, I did not approach my reviewing of the material with any prior notions of what should be included, what shouldn't. I took it as is, as a finished product, but as, from the eyes of an instructor, concerned citizen, parent, and even student, to the extent I can put myself back in, kindergarten through fifth grade mindset, and say, does this help me understand my world? Does it help the student understand their world? And of course, is it accurate? So those two were my only two criteria. And I believe based on those two criteria, the material is complete and does a good job.
We did a poll a couple of weeks ago, and we asked about this question about including religious references in public school. 64% said that they were in favor of including historical religious references, and only 33% said that they were opposed. So I think it shows that we're on the right side here.
Exactly. Parents want it, right?
That's it.
It's worked. Parents are in favor of it, then yeah. And especially some people call it heavy-handed. I would call it soft-handed. The state did not mandate that school districts do this, which they could have.
Yeah.
They are simply incentivizing that the school districts use this curriculum. That's kind of right. Soft-handed, really. Exactly.
Well, and two, they also said, because one of the questions is that reporters keep asking us, like, well, what if they don't use it? Like, what if they're not comfortable using the religious references? And it's like, that's 1 page out of 30 in that unit. Or, the part about Jesus's life is 8 pages out of 340 in the whole unit on Roman Empire. If there are aspects of that they don't want to cover, there's a lot of other material in there for them. It's not like like they have to like then go outside of the material. To your point about don't go too far outside of the material, there's hundreds of pages of other things that they can talk about. And so
the material is really comprehensive. The teacher should not struggle at all.
And how, if you did have a concerned parent who was worried, maybe they're not Christian and they think, there's a lot of references in here, in this particular chapter, we're talking about the life of Jesus Christ. There's a lot of references there. What would you say to a concerned parent who says, well, that's not what we teach at home. I feel like, my values and things are being left out in learning this particular material. To a lot of parents, that may seem like a pretty legitimate concern. What would you do to respond to her?
Yeah, fundamentally, I'd come back to the difference between, if you will, religious instruction and simply cultural historical reference, right? We don't live, especially in this country, we live in a country that has been much inspired by the thoughts and ideology and, all the aspects thereof of the Christian religion. And Judaism as a precursor to that Christian religion. Mm-hmm. So when we study our history, you're going to come across those kind of references. Even when we study, let's say, our more recent history, when you think about civil rights movements, plural, not just the civil rights movement of African Americans, but even suffrage, the suffrage movement before that and other movements before that, much of this was inspired. If you read these documents and listen to these speeches, much of this is inspired by, again, that Judeo-Christian worldview, Judeo-Christian references. And we want our students to understand the reference. So that's what's included in the material. As far as religious instruction, that part's not there. And I can go into that a little bit more if
Yeah, absolutely, if you would, because one of the examples that we've used before here is, one of the seminal pieces on moral justice, of course, is Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail. You can't get through the first 4 or 5 paragraphs without understanding the religious references. It's sort of the justification for why he's even writing this letter, much less sitting there in jail and taking his punishment, as it were. You can't even get through the first 4 or 5 paragraphs without several references. And if you don't understand what those references are, then you won't understand the purpose of the piece, right?
Exactly. I mean, Declaration of Independence is another perfect example. Mm-hmm. So religious instruction. Right? Central to religious instruction is this idea, and atheists tend to disagree with this idea, but it's this idea that there is some independent, otherworldly entity out there in the universe that whose decisions affects our lives and has some kind of mandate on our behavior, right? And religious instruction generally encourages us to obey, if not submit to, if not worship, that entity. That's the nature of religious instruction. This curriculum is completely absent of that kind of instruction. Mm-hmm. It's just not there. Mm-hmm. It is simply cultural literacy, but it's referencing, the religious ideology, the religious figures that inspired those cultural events.
And that's one of the hard things about this is because, this is a huge curriculum from K through 5. And despite the fact that it's been online for several months now, I'm guessing that a lot of people haven't, taken the time to go through and read every single, page of the new curriculum. And so a lot of them don't know the way that you do what is actually in the curriculum because you were, part of the board that was charged with reading all of this. And so that's really helpful to hear. The other side of it is, or a different angle on it is, third grade is not a comparative religion class. Right, like there's been some pushback here, which is like, well, you spent so much time on Christianity, and yes, you might make a good case in terms of the impact that it had on Western civilization, but there's so much of it, and there's almost next to nothing, when it comes to discussing these other religions. To which I would respond, third grade's not a comparative religion class. You're not learning about the world's religions in third grade. You're learning about the Roman Empire, and you can't make the same claim about other religions and their effects on things that help develop the Western civilization. in that way. One of the other, and then some of the criticisms are really just so nitpicky. One that I thought I would like you to address is this idea of quote whitewashing Christianity. That in fact there were some horrific incidences, of course, in the history of Christianity, and that some of those things are not included or not included in the graphic way that they should be included to be considered accurate. Do you have a response for that kind of criticism?
Yeah, the number one response would be what's relevant to our K through 12 or K through 5 fifth grade students, right? Mm-hmm. What is important for them to know? Again, the way this is, even the references that are there are so embedded within, the history of what led to our world today, and especially the references, the way that kindergarten through fifth grade students are going to come across that. So, to what extent is that even necessary to quote unquote get into the details of some of the poor ways that Christianity was used, as well as some of the more positive ways that Christianity is used? Largely, it's going to be inappropriate to have those kind of discussions at this stage. Now, when we get to the high school level curriculum, maybe 10th, 11th, 12th grade, maybe that'll be much more appropriate. But at this stage, it's not very appropriate.
Right. I mean, if there were, incidents of major violence or brutality, I mean, these are first graders, these are second graders. You're not going to necessarily tell those kinds of stories, even if they may be more accurate to be, more graphic. You're not going to do that with first and second graders. It's just totally inappropriate. The other question we have is, of course, the curriculum is free. It's available to every district. It allows teachers to use this material so that they don't have to spend their nights and weekends looking up materials online and those kinds of things. Some have said that instead of looking at that as like a benefit, some have said, well, that's heavy-handed. Like you're forcing the curriculum on teachers to use this curriculum. What any thoughts on forcing teachers to use the curriculum?
Well, I'd leave that to our state leaders to the extent that they're concerned about, if you will, public pushback against that. But one, you've already mentioned, it's voluntary. Yes, there's an incentive, to the school districts to use this curriculum. I believe there's going to be some kind of discount to them if they use this curriculum. And there is the expectation that the teachers will be faithful to the materials. Right? That they will not freelance too much, but really teach what is there. But my argument would be what is there is very safe. I'd be concerned if teachers were freelancing too much with the materials therein, because the creators thereof have done a very good job of staying on the right side of that line of separation of church and state with these materials. And so if there was too much lax use of this, it could go off the rails. But if they stick with the materials, I think they will stay safe, and the materials are good. So, and then the last argument I would make is the proof is in the pudding. Much of this material had been piloted, if you will, during the COVID era. So when smaller school districts were unable to use a curriculum or did not have access to a curriculum that could be easily used online. This was explained to us by the commissioner. So the commissioner of TA can give more detail to this. But they were able to put forth this curriculum to help those school districts. And they saw great results, which is what motivated the state legislature to instruct TEA to develop it even more so and put it out there for the entire state. So it's worked is the short answer. And so since it's worked, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to incentivize school districts and teachers to use it.
That's a great point, and probably a really good point to end on is that, look, if the pilot programs are showing a lot of success, we've got stories of principals and teachers saying that they really appreciate the materials and having access to them. The parents are saying that they're excited to be able to guarantee that the materials are on grade level, which is one of the major issues that we have with our public education system. And of course, with your good analysis, demonstrating that even some of these concerns, which could certainly legitimate in certain areas, are not necessarily something to be worried about, because you have taken, a really cautious approach to making sure that, we're all within the bounds of the law here, and that these materials are relevant, most importantly relevant, to a child's education. So thank you so much, Dr. McNeese. This has been a great conversation. I think you've cleared up a lot, hopefully, for people. So really appreciate you being on.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And for those of you listening and watching, we really appreciate you as well. And as we always like to say here in our show, do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.